The Louisiana Eviction Notice. What is an eviction notice? Eviction notice, or notice to quit, is a letter sent by the landlord to the tenant notifying them that they should either take or stop a certain action or vacate the rented premises. Eviction notice can be of two types: conditional, when a tenant is given time to remedy the breach of the lease, or unconditional, when a landlord terminates the lease without any alternative options for a tenant. What should an eviction notice include? Information about the tenant and the landlord. The reason for sending the notice. The date by which the tenant should take or stop a certain action. The consequences of non-compliance. The date and way of notice delivery, and the landlord's signature in the form of certificate of service attached to the notice. How to evict a tenant in Louisiana. The non-payment notice. There is no statutory grace period for rent payment in the state of Louisiana. This enables the landlord to send the notice to the tenant the very next day after the rent is due, unless otherwise stated in the lease. The tenant failing to pay rent after it is due should get a 5-day notice to quit before the landlord can lawfully terminate the lease. The landlord is not obliged by law to give the tenant the ability to pay rent past due. If the lease is verbal, the landlord is obliged to give a 20-day notice to the tenant. Non-compliance notice. When it comes to other lease violations, Louisiana law does not require the landlord to give the tenant the possibility to correct the issue, but a 5-day notice to quit is always required. What if the tenant fails to comply? If the tenant fails to pay rent due and associated fees or correct the violation, the landlord can file a complaint with the appropriate Louisiana court. The filing fee will depend on the county. Then, the summons and complaint should be served on the tenant by the sheriff or constable no less than 2 days before the hearing date. If the tenant wants to contest an eviction, they can appear for the hearing. They might also file a formal answer with the court if they think they might appeal after the issue of the judgment. If they fail to do it, the court might make a judgment in favor of the landlord by default. If the judge rules in the landlord's favor, the court will issue a writ of possession. In Louisiana, the document gives the tenant 24 hours to move out, or otherwise the tenant will be forcibly evicted by the sheriff, constable, or marshal.